The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus had come into the temple area, the chief priests and the elders of the people approached him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them in reply, "I shall ask you one question, and if you answer it for me, then I shall tell you by what authority I do these things. Where was John's baptism from? Was it of heavenly or of human origin?" They discussed this among themselves and said, "If we say of heavenly origin, he will say to us, 'Then why did you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we fear the crowd, for they regard John as a prophet." So they said to Jesus in reply, "We do not know." He himself said to them, "Neither shall I tell you by what authority I do these things." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Somehow a frightfully appropriate gospel for the end of a semester of interacting with teachers. You ask a simple question. "I'll ask you a question first," he responds. It's one of, to me, the most complicated but captivating moments where we seem to interact with Christ's mind in his discussing in the temple with the chief priests and the elders of the people, the way that he can see through their question to their souls and what they are really trying to do. His question is simple. Where was John's baptism from? Was it of heavenly or of human origin? He even makes it a multiple choice question. And what we see is interesting in these people around him is they clearly have no answer. They can imagine possible answers, but they were never trying to learn the answer to this question. They're simply objecting to Christ. What authority do you have? In his generosity, he actually tries to respond to them. They are not interested in getting this question right. They're not interested in learning from Christ. The answer to the question, of course, is of heavenly origin. Although John the Baptist is a human being. In some sense, it's also of human origin. The reason people went out there, Christ himself challenges. This is just the reading yesterday at Mass. What did you come out here to see? A guy who behaves in a very odd way. Many people came to see John just because he was weird. Dresses in animal skins and eats locusts and honey. You've got to see it. Some people came for other reasons because they knew it was of heavenly origin. Human effect, perhaps, but heavenly origin. But it's a great, if we say of heavenly origin, they're not imagining actually believing that. But if we say it, here's how he's going to get us. He'll say, "Well, then why didn't you believe him?" It's taken for granted, well, of course we don't believe anything, really. You can feel in their debating what to say. They're only interested in somehow proving that they're the ones who have the authority to speak in this location. The issue is not reaching reality. It's not really wanting to know something. I say that's an awfully appropriate thing, or kind of frighteningly appropriate thing to hear at the end of a semester, when we, all of us on all sides of the classroom, have spent a lot of time discussing things and trying to know things, but we have not always, or perhaps rarely, have we done so with the right eagerness to find what's real. Because it's a frightening thing to find, and a very confusing one, and we also need to get our work done. There need to be days where it's simply steady and normal. But we should be asking, where does this really come from? We should not be like these chief priests and elders who are simply playing with the question and trying not to be beaten by Jesus. I love his conclusion when they just say, well, we don't know. That's not something we can know. Well, then I won't tell you anything else. You've got to try to answer the question in order to get to the real question. This is sort of the theory I often propound. It's true, all of us professors, we know that, yes, there's the exams, but what's actually being tested is being tested so many other times than the exam itself. Or we know as teachers, what you're really teaching is rarely what you think you're teaching. You walk into the room and you're planning to discuss this or that book of the Iliad, and you do discuss this or that book of the Iliad with the students, perhaps even very, very well, but what they are learning from it is not that book of the Iliad that you discuss, but some other thing. We know that that's what we are called to have been doing, and still to be doing, here even at the conclusion of a semester. What does it mean to really go forth and engage with earnestness and honesty and as much directness as we can muster with what God really wants to tell us? With the question of, the John the Baptist question is fascinating, but even more fascinating, the question of Jesus Christ. The Lord who comes to encounter us in the Word today and in the sacraments in a moment. Is he of heavenly origin or of human origin? We're here because we know he is of heavenly origin and yet is also a human being. We're not here because we're like, well, I don't know. On the Monday after finals, you wouldn't be here if that's all you had to say. You may not know what you really have to say to him, because our responding to reality is pretty twisted and complicated for a lot of reasons. The martyr whom we are in the Cistercian order commemorating today, and by extension also you here nearby, had the moment where he encountered this question: what shall I in fact really do? And stepped forth to encounter Christ. So as I was saying in a homily recently about St. Francis Xavier, when he crossed the world to find the mission fields of Asia, what he was doing was not simply running from Paris, but in his way running towards Christ. What does it mean to run towards Christ? Blessed Janos died very young. At the age of 18, he decided to enter the novitiate of the Cistercian monastery of Zirz in Hungary, the monastery that coordinated all of the different Cistercian schools in Hungary, one of which he himself had gone to. At that age of 18, already rather young, of course, to begin a monastic life, but furthermore, this was in 1950, in August of 1950. In October of 1950, the monastery was shut down, and everyone saw it coming. He decided, his older brother was already a monk there. His other brother became a diocesan priest, and as far as I know, may actually still be alive. He was certainly alive at the beatification of his older brother. They knew that this was a venture that was going to collapse any moment, and decided that's what we were signing up for. Now, that's not the kind of person who says, well, if we say this, he'll say this, and if we say this, he'll say that, right? It's like, I'm diving in. The monastery was closed, and its many monks, particularly those in formation, the young monks, were shuttled off into different forms of hiding. Some of them became law students. Father Rock, who was a professor here for a long time, and the anniversary of his death was just yesterday, he became a library science student. Sort of neutral territory. Great excuse for a young guy to carry around too many books was the idea. We have to be theology students, but in secret. Well, Blessed Janos was one of those, maybe one would say more fortunate, except it ended up with his savage death. Well, that turned out to be good fortune for him in another way. He was moved into a diocesan seminary. where he received priestly formation. He went back to the name Janos, his baptismal name, although his monastic name was Anastasius. He kept the Cistercian habit with him, but was never, of course, allowed to wear it, as no one was, in fact. And received his priestly formation. As a young priest, he was extraordinarily charismatic. In the town where he was ministering for just the 2 years that he had before his death, he drew all the young people to him, who were so eager to hear something real rather than merely the communist propaganda offered to them by a city effectively run sort of by the police station. He was so popular, of course, that the government turned against him, and he was occasionally threatened physically. He'd be riding his little motorcycle down the road to get somewhere, and people would sort of jump out at him, throw sticks and things like that. The police officers then eventually went to the bishop and said, "Hey, we need you to get rid of this guy. Practically speaking, what he's doing is he's drawing all of the young people to church and to these retreats he's running, rather than to the communist youth group they're required by law to be involved in. So we're recommending to you, Your Excellency, that you find some other place to put him." Hint, hint, right? The bishop actually called him in and said, "Well, Janos, I'm suggesting that maybe we move you to a different parish, maybe into the big city where you can sort of do your thing, maybe less noticed." And Blessed Janos said, "Well, no, I want to stay here." The one thing he wanted, we have the diary he wrote as he was preparing to take the Cistercian habit. So the one thing I want is to become a saint. The one reason I want to do that is to see the face of Christ. There's no other answer to the question of what I'm supposed to be doing. And here I am ministering to young people who are eager to hear the message of Christ. It's impossible to leave that merely for fear or for whatever political reason it would seem. So shortly thereafter, once it became clear that he would be remaining, it's probably the night of December 14th. His feast is December 15th, partly because of St. John of the Cross, whose feast is yesterday, and partly because it may have been he died late in the evening, in the nighttime that was already the 15th. Someone came to his parish rectory door, a young man whose name we don't know, and said, "Oh, my uncle is dying. Could you bring him communion?" They never have figured out who put this person up to this task. But Blessed Janos had a sense that this is probably a trap. Nonetheless, you don't refuse such a request in case there is a dying man. So Blessed Janos went to go get the Eucharist, to put in the pyx, the little portable kind of miniature ciborium, put on his surplice and stole, and followed this person towards his uncle's house. Janos knew this was a real person's house. He knew where the house was in a way. And this was a journey that involved, for quickness' sake, walking off the road into a path through the dark woods on a winter night. At some point in the middle of that, this other person disappeared, and a gang of police officers arrived. What they didn't know is that Janos, or actually they did know, it's one of the reasons they didn't like Blessed Janos, he was a very athletic person. So he could play a lot of soccer games with the kids and draw them in that way. So he actually made a pretty good run for it, towards the house that he had been aiming for, all while wearing a cassock and surplice and carrying the Eucharist with him. It's hard to run in these things if you try, even if you're good at running. Eventually they caught him. He was found stabbed to death, multiple knives, some 30 or so wounds. They'd stabbed him, and as he lay on the ground, had then sort of trampled over his body, actually breaking his neck, it seems, with their feet. But he'd fallen face down and had clasped the Eucharist to his chest to guard it. And that was still there when they found him. So in their wisdom, these murderers did not also desecrate the Eucharist, except sort of secondarily. They still have the surplice he's wearing, all cut up and covered in blood. There's a chapel there still where he was murdered. He's a person who, not much older than in his mid-20s, who knew he was walking into the real question. Not simply, what do you think, was it human origin, was it heavenly origin, what's he going to do with this or that, but the actual issue of my life's fulfillment. What if my life's fulfillment is in dying now? And he saw with a clarity that came from God that that was the step to take. That the most fruitful thing he could do for the good of mankind was to go forth into that trap, unarmed, except with his reverence for the Eucharist as his defense. And his example has already borne great fruit. Even here, if you think about it, half of the faculty who started this university were Cistercian monks from Hungary, that first 2 years of the faculty. Many of them knew him personally. When they began the fall semester, the second year of UD, when they finished their exams, they heard their friend had been murdered. It's hard to imagine how that informs one's energy teaching, you know? The hopes that were built into the foundation of this place, that you too will be able, attending to what is around you here, to find the face of Christ, to come to that which Christ wants you to do, to follow in those steps. The star is, in fact, shining that will guide you to Christ. The dangers you face, God willing, will not be as directly an attack on you, perhaps, as those who murdered Blessed Janos. But there are many dangers. They may be more subtle, but they are there. Seek the face of Christ. Seek that light. Be devoted to that hope of seeing him. As Blessed Janos, cling to him as you can. You know that Christ is wanting to welcome you and receive you. He has loved you first. This is the source of your confidence, I pray, as it was the source of Blessed Janos's, knowing that you are already loved by Christ, the one who gives himself for you. Loved by all the saints who have given their lives. They didn't know you, but they gave their lives because they wanted to see what you would become. They are watching. They will be your companions in heaven. Strive to face that reality, not simply to play with the questions, but to engage with the truth.